Alrighty, so here we go. Let's talk about export and stuff. So I've got a new file here, and I'm going to make a character real quick. So I'm going to clay. I'm going to turn on mirror. I'm going to turn on angle snap and turn on grid. Now, the first thing to kind of realize is that this thing right here, this black crosshair, you want to try to start from the very center of that thing to kind of create things that are going to be lined up properly. Because at the end of the day, the orientation to this X is how it comes into Unity. So if it's not oriented properly, it can come in all sideways and it's just hard to work with. So try to center it. All right, so once it's centered, we'll just create a quick little character here, something that we can mess around with. So I'll make that a little larger, and then we'll use the move tool symmetrically to just create something that we can work with. You know, doesn't have to be anything too crazy for an example, but just enough so we can see the difference in polygons and exports and stuff like that. So here we go. It's kind of looking like clubby a little bit. It doesn't matter that much. A little bit of a face. Maybe more like this. Yeah, that works. All right, so we've got a character. Some feet, hands. Let's pull the head out slightly. Okay, and then we'll paint it so you can see the paint and the export process. Turn off mirror, turn off snap, turn off grid, make it wide, just give it a spray. Looks pretty good, like so. And just to break up the color so we can see the import process, give it like black little tips here. Maybe a little black like that. Maybe give it a shirt or something. There we go. Looks pretty good. All right, so we've got this character. Now this character is at full resolution for what we've sculpted. Now, just strictly talking about exports, we go up to File, Export, and on this screen we can see the triangle. So this thing has 194,000 triangles. That's pretty high. It's always a game of trying to get the least amount of triangles while still looking good. So here's how it's done. Up here with the triangles, we can set this to 10% triangles. So we're going to export this instead of at 194,000, we're going to do this at 19,000 and see what it looks like. I'm going to leave paint on vertex color. I'm going to leave the mesh file format on object and press export. This is going to ask where you want it to go on the computer. So I'm going to set this to my desktop. I'm going to just call this X10 for 10%. And hit enter and export. This decimation screen pops up, takes a second to crunch. Alright, so that export's been completed. Now to preview this, from medium, you can come into the layers, add sculpt layer, pick the character, and go to add. And here we have the export. Now this on the right, it has way less geometry than this on the left. Yet it looks pretty darn close, really, when you compare them. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's this process of being like, well, how far can I reduce this while making it still look pretty darn good? So we know that looks good. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of it. And we're going to re-export this character again, but we're going to make it go even lower this time. So instead of 10%, let's just go ahead and try 1%, only 2,000. This is probably going to be a wreck, but let's see what it looks like. So export, and we'll call this one XX. And we got this XX1, we're going to call this. So that's crunching. And we'll bring it back in. So we're going to add polymesh, XX1. Now make sure you give it a good click because sometimes this thing, see how this is glitched right now? It's like stuck here. It won't select that. And I think this is a bug. So I'm going to switch that, go back to here and re-click it to make it go. So when medium fixes their shit, you'll be able to just click on it. But for now, watch out for that bug. So there it is. We'll click add. And I mean, even at low poly, that's not that bad. I mean, he's a little bit blocky in the face there. But overall, I mean, we're talking about a huge difference in polygons. Let's just look at the numbers here again. We went from 194,000 down to about 2000. And so that's going to perform much better in the engine while still looking pretty sharp. So this is kind of how this balancing process works. So as you're making your models, a couple things to consider. One is this process where I've just started high poly and then I'm exporting out to figure out something. The other approach to this, and this isn't a more advanced approach. The pro sculptors seem to do this a lot, but it's something to think about. When you start out in your canvas here, start at low resolution. So I'm gonna go with the clay. I'm gonna do the same process, turning on my mirror, my angle snap, and my grid, just so I can find the very center of it, which is here. And then before I even do anything, I'm gonna down the resolution of this layer. So I've got layer 1 selected, and then right here is increase and decrease. So I'm gonna down this 3 times. And with that done, I'm gonna turn this on to single stamp and set that. So if I go to File, Export, I can see we're working with almost 4,000 triangles with that one thing right there. And still it looks like pretty round, it's not deformed or anything. But if I decide I'm going to go even lower here, then we're going another level down, and we'll create the same sphere, and then we'll go to Export. We're down to 1700. And so this is how this goes, is like, how low can you go with this kind of thing? We'll decrease it one more time. You know, now we're starting to see there's a little bit of chunk going on in the sphere, so we're starting to get to a pretty low resolution. We're also down to 824 triangles. I mean, that's pretty low. So at 824, you can start to come in here. You'll notice stuff like the move tool still works pretty good at 824 triangles. It's not bad. So if you come in and start to flesh out your structure of your character at really low poly, now, you're not going to do fine details like face and stuff like that, but you might be able to do the form of it. And this is what a lot of these artists do, is they'll sit here and they'll figure out the overall form of the character. They'll say, all right, well, that looks pretty good, but I want to put fine detail on the interior of this now. And that's when they'll come in and they'll up the resolution on the layer just a little bit. Because if I go back to my clay tool, for example, and I want to dial in on some of these details, notice I'm getting like little nuggets of stuff here. I'm going to turn off grid snap for a second, just so I can work a little bit closer to the actual stuff. We'll keep mirror on. So I want to fill in this detail, but it's kind of, you know, it's all chunky. So maybe at this point you can say to yourself, well, now I actually need to work a little finer. So you have two options. You can take this resolution if you want to modify the mesh itself, and then come back and increase this layer's resolution. And now this is a little bit finer. And if that's not good enough, you can increase it again. And so you start to get the resolution you need to start to fill in the detail that you want. Option 2, which I kind of like, is the idea of maybe this looks good enough. And let's look at our export. So the only way to see how many triangles the object is to go to export. It's a little tedious, but this will say, all right, you're at 6,000. If I come in here and I up this again, it's probably going to jump substantially. So we're at 6,000. We're increasing one more time. Now we're at 13,000. So we more than doubled it by doing that. So we're back down to 6,000. Instead of doubling the entire layer of resolution, it might be possible, depending on what you're building, to just create another layer and then have this layer be higher resolution. Put some fine detail into it. Like that kind of thing. And so when you're finished, you've got an option of exporting it just like this, which can work. Or you can come in and combine the layers together. Now, watch what happens to the resolution when we start combining these things. I'm going to combine it, merge it. Oops. Merge. Sorry. So I'm picking this layer, and then I'm holding down the left trigger over here and pointing at this layer, and then pulling down the right trigger over here. I'm able to select both layers at the same time. And then I'm going to merge them together. Now what we can see is that there's a little bit, this is like a little bit blocky in here, because I'm not 100% on this, but what I think it does is it kind of takes a difference between the two layers resolution and goes with that. So sometimes that works fine, sometimes it's too blocky. It's just basically something you got to dial in and figure out for yourself. So over here we're at 164,000 triangles now. Just adding those spheres added a whole lot of resolution to it. But we can probably get away with decimating a lot of this detail in the export process here. So going from 64,000, we'll just knock this thing right down to 1600 and see what it looks like. Export. Call this one Facehugger 1. Export. And we'll bring it back in to see what it looks like. Add polymesh. Now this is the glitch again I'm talking about, where it won't let you necessarily click to the left. So I'm clicking over here, and then I'm clicking over there. I'm bringing the facehugger in, add it, and look at it. I mean, that's, the little nodules there are kind of messed up. So maybe that's too low at this point. So I'm going to get rid of that. Let's try one more export here. And then maybe it's more like 10%. So this is at 16,000, which is still a little high. So maybe I can get away with like 8,000. Let's try that. I'll call this FC8 or FH8 for 8,000, 8K. Export. And we'll bring it back in for a preview. Add polymesh layer, 8K. There we go. Add. And that actually looks pretty good for 8K. Yeah, I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all. That looks nice. So this is what I'm talking about, the savings. It's kind of a process of just kind of dialing it in. It's just see how low you can get it. The lower the better, always. Maybe an exception comes into this when I try to animate this stuff. I got to figure out how low we can go resolution-wise with the polys and still make it animate correctly. But for now, just try to get as low as possible with whatever you're working on. And your approach could be to build it high res and then decimate to get it to look good. Or it could be start low resolution, build it up low res, and then add higher res as you need it. Kind of like pro tactics. So there you go, guys. Hopefully this is real helpful to you. I think it's one of these things that makes a lot more sense when you see it than trying to explain it. So there we go. Just let me know if you get any questions about it, and I will do what I can to make another video or explain it out. All right, excited to see what you guys make with this. I am just amped that we're going to start building our own stuff in Medium, right out of our imaginations, into Medium, into the game engine, and we can start making the games that we want to make. All right, peace.